Listo.
Okay, good. So thanks everybody. A great job so far. Just fascinating things for sure. I'm going to focus today on emerging platforms for targeted and optimized drug delivery. I think one of the things I really want to focus on, though, is the concept of targeted drug delivery, and you'll see that play out as we go. What I'd like to do is review the evolution and architecture of drug delivery, understand some of the clinical dynamics driving transformation. I have roughly almost 28 years of experience commercializing technologies. And so I always look at what are the dynamics in the marketplace, as many of you have, that really drives the transformation. Research is phenomenal. It's incredibly important. There's got to be some demand that's driving us in one direction or another. And we'll go through that. I want to look specifically around some of the emerging areas of drug delivery, optimization, again, with a focus on targeted drug delivery. We can discuss some of the opportunities, which is my favorite part, which is like, how do we actually commercialize it and bring it to life, and what are some of the real world applications? And then at the end, we'll just take some Q&A if there is any. This is my background. I'm not going to go through it, but some of the companies you may recognize: IBM Watson Health. I served as Senior Vice President, Global Head of Commercialization. Merge Healthcare, one of the leaders in medical imaging. Millennium Pharmaceuticals, that was acquired by Takeda. One of the founders of Precision Health and Precision Medicine, had one of the largest genomics and proteomics databases in the world, and MassBio, one of the largest industry consortiums for life sciences. So I've been blessed to be involved with lots of transformational thought leaders along the way, and have seen a lot of great successes, have seen delays, have even seen some failures along the way, as I think we all have. So I'd like to focus on the evolution of drug delivery. Don't think of these as exact dates, but really kind of directional points in time from a chronological standpoint and from an evolutionary standpoint. As you see, furthest back, the concept of sustained drug delivery, right? Recognizing that, in some cases you need to take the drug and control the level of release, as you're delivering the drug for obvious reasons. Then we moved up to metered dose inhalation, an alternative way to not only deliver, but the whole concept of metering, again, controlling the level of drug up or down. Transdermal patch. I mean, some of the recent startups that are getting a lot of press around transdermal delivery of the drug as if it's relatively new. It actually isn't new. It's been around for a long time now. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Unlike a needle or an IV, it really connotes self-administration, simplified administration. And that's certainly true today as well. Microspheres, right? Miniaturization and unique ways of actually be able to, again, encapsulate and deliver a drug. Intranasal delivery, which I'm going to focus on a lot today. It's been around nearly 40 years, just like transdermal. And so you would think, having been around 40 plus years, that there's an optimal platform for delivering drugs to the brain via the nose. And until pretty recent, that really hasn't been the case. The concept, the potential was recognized very early on, but certainly the ability to do it is relatively new. Again, controlled release, right? Recognizing that you gotta go a little bit further than just the drug itself. Nanoparticles. Some of this may even date a little bit further back, but really miniaturization, right? Nanotechnology. We've heard a lot about that today, and it's one of my favorite subjects, quite frankly, and you've all done a phenomenal job at really advancing nanotechnology. Particularly the last speaker was stellar at presenting, the potential of nanotechnologies. And then digital medicine, obviously, one of my other favorite topics, coming from IBM Watson Health, really the intersection of, advanced data mining and artificial intelligence, combined with the potential for precision health, combined with the ability to target and optimize drug delivery, all in a quote unquote digital sense, again, utilizing nanotechnology. That's, I think, a little bit further out, quite frankly. And of course, we're going to see more bubbles as we go. This is not the complete picture, but it certainly represents, one commonality that we see here is the recognition that you just can't deliver a drug. It's not just about the drug. It's about where the drug needs to go. It's recognizing that there are barriers that you need to overcome, and you've got to just continue to come at it from a multitude of ways to really focus on the potential to fully optimize the delivery of drug from end to end. The best drug a delivery of a drug to the point of administration, and then absorption and distribution of that drug. This is a slide that's, again, one of my favorites. I don't think this is going to surprise anyone on here, but it's quite interesting, right, to kind of put on the one fell swoop, which is that most of the drugs, in order of 2/3 of all drugs, are orally administered. It makes sense, right? Unlike an injection or intravenous, it's self-administration. It's not a needle. People don't like needles. They don't have anxiety. You just pop a pill, like an M&M or a candy. One of the implications and complications, of course, with oral is that it has to go through liver enzyme degradation, right? 75% loss, tremendous loss. Then it goes into systemic circulation. You often hear, and I have a lot of people tell me, well, Don, my doctor told me the injection intravenous is the optimal way to deliver a drug. That's not really completely accurate, right? It's certainly accurate in terms of the definition of achieving 100% bioavailability. By definition, you're delivering the drug directly to the bloodstream. That is a true statement. But certainly when it pertains to delivering the drug, particularly to the brain, that is not an optimal way to actually deliver the drug. But even if you take an injection intravenous or even transdermal, you do overcome that first pass effect, which is helpful, but you're still got a ways to go, right? It's still a systemic circulation. It's still the point at which adverse effects start to surface. And we've seen lots of examples of that, even emerging classes of drugs that have great potential. Again, it's not the drug's fault, right? These are drugs that have great potential. It's the anatomical and physiological impedance. It's in some cases physics. I'm going to get into physics. Physics doesn't belong in this presentation. It actually does. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But there's real impedance that's adversely affecting the drug. Again, it's not always the drug's fault, right? And sure enough, there are great drugs that got sidelined because of the adverse effects that were caused with this systemic circulation. These are real, sad stories. And then, of course, if you got to get up to the brain, now you're in a world of hurt because you got to bypass the blood-brain barrier and blood-CSF barrier. 98 to 100% of total loss impedance, and that's very, very problematic. That's what I'll call the traditional way of delivering a drug. Well, the great news, and again, yes, it went back into the 80s where it was first recognized as a potential delivery route, but because of the failure to take into consideration not only the physiological barriers, but the anatomical barriers, but also the laws of physics, until recently, the delivery devices have failed to really maximize the potential of intranasal delivery, but we're going to show that that has completely turned around and it presents a great opportunity for the future. But intranasal, the advantage is that there are areas within the nasal cavity, the trigeminal nerve within the respiratory zone, and we'll amplify that a bit more. The olfactory, skull base, right between your eyebrows. It is possible to get to through the intranasal route, but it's certainly very, very difficult. And unless you can somehow defy the laws of physics with existing devices, you're never going to get there. But should you be able to get there and deliver the drug to that point of administration, then you have the potential to do some great things, including directly delivering the drug to the brain, utilizing a lot of the nanotechnologies that we heard today to further optimize from an absorption and distribution standpoint. Very, very exciting. So let's talk about some of the clinical dynamics that are driving transformation. Again, without those dynamics, without pressure, without pain, there's often not enough kind of momentum and focus and excitement to actually move an industry along. And unfortunately, there's a lot of clinical dynamics out there that's forcing this. So if you look on the left-hand side, right, mental health disorders, neurological disorders. We often hear about oncology, cardiology, diabetes. Those are huge. I've had family members and parents who have died from all of the above. Totally get it. It's horrific. But if you were to look at the global economic and health impact, and you were to sum up neurological disorders and psychiatric disorders, it's unmatched. It's absolutely massive, right? Depression, anxiety disorders, bipolar, schizophrenia. You talk about usage disorders, opioid use disorders, alcohol, nicotine use disorders, hugely problematic. Look at neurological, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, lots of neurodegeneration of which we covered today, lots of examples. You've got pain, you've got seizures, all kinds of, impactful disorders that are actually impacting the ability of the brain to function. That again, you combine these two, it's huge. As if that wasn't bad enough, now on the right-hand side, right, we have the global economic and health impact of COVID-19. And it's easy, I think, sometimes to focus on, oh, it's a immuno response issue. It's really dealt with vaccines. It's really immunology. But as we've seen, and as the world is going to continue to see, is that secondary to the virus, downstream, which I think is going to have a greater economic global impact, are the neurological mental health disorders that are being caused directly and indirectly by COVID. So you got to throw COVID into this mix of neurological and mental health disorders. So again, as if it wasn't bad enough, a huge market, hugely impactful. Now you've got, again, COVID-19 into that mix. So we're going to give you a real world example of how that could play out in a positive way. High failure rates, right? So if you look at the drug pipeline, you look on the far left-hand side, everything works tremendously on a whiteboard or a spreadsheet, until you hit kind of the real world, right? Until you hit real physiological and anatomical barriers. You deal with physics, you deal with the human body, you go from mouse to the human, and there's a radically different construct from an anatomical standpoint, even including intranasal. And so you start going down the pipeline and it narrows really, really quickly, right? I think, as we all know. But let's kind of amplify this a bit, again, with a lot more focus on the brain. If you look at quote unquote brain drugs, the failure rate is truly unmatched. Neurological, psychiatric, or mental health disorders are towards the very, very bottom. That equates to a 2x higher attrition rate. It equates to 30% higher cost. And when you have higher attrition, when you have higher failure, when you have higher costs, when you have greater complications, unfortunately, research will spend a lot of time focused on it, as they should. And without research, we wouldn't be where we are today. But further downstream from a commercialization standpoint, which is where it matters, when you actually deliver the drug to a human being to actually remediate and address, treat and prevent those illnesses, pharmaceutical companies factor all this in. Again, I think most people know it takes 10 to 14 years to produce a drug, $2.5 billion to produce a blockbuster. Used to be $1.5 billion, now it's 2.5 billion. The trend is negative. Pharmaceutical companies, the folks that actually invest to commercialize this, take all that into consideration, and they generally take the path of least resistance, not the path of most resistance. Fortunately, at Neosinus, we've actually taken the path of greatest resistance, which is everything that we've talked about, because we actually see the potential of intranasal delivery. We see the potential of being able to leverage and utilize great classes of drugs. Those drugs may be off patent, but they have very well-known safety profiles. They may be natural products, like we heard early on, that are typically not easy to patent. It's still okay. We don't particularly care whether the drug is natural, whether it's patented, off patent, it makes no difference whatsoever. When you take a drug that has highest potential and you combine it with a high potential delivery mechanism and platform, you have something special. And then imagine being able to combine that further with nanotechnology and nanomedicine, the ability at that point of administration to further optimize absorption and distribution. Now you have a full end-to-end platform to really revolutionize a space in a therapeutic set of areas that have historically been a graveyard for drug delivery and drug development. And now we can flip that on its head, which is hugely exciting. I think a great example of that are with the psychedelics. Some of you may laugh, what are psychedelics? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. A bunch of people in la la land. There's some real potential here, and we can't ignore that, and we shouldn't ignore that. I think one of the challenges, quite frankly, and I'm being really blunt here, I think one of the challenges is I've spoken to a lot of people in the psychedelic space. In fact, half our pipeline is focused on psychedelics. So I'm not throwing psychedelics under the bus. I'm actually a huge fan of psychedelics. I think what's happening here, though, is that there's a miscalculation whereby the folks that are advancing psychedelics, and they are for a reason. Why? Because of everything I just covered. When you have a void of drugs in the pipeline, and even drugs that have made their way through, and we have lots of examples, I'm not going to name them. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. We have lots of examples of where there's been transformational drugs that have emerged after decades of time, and they've fallen right down on their face, and it's a problem. Psychedelic industry sees that as an opportunity, as they should, to say, you know what, maybe there's a different way of coming at it. So they're coming at it differently in terms of their now psychedelic classes of drugs, but unfortunately, a lot of them are taking the same conventional route, the oral, the intravenous, everything I just covered. Just because it's a psychedelic drug, because it's magical, because it's a blue mushroom that's grown in the rainforest, that doesn't mean that the physiological, the anatomical, the physics that have impeded delivery of drugs to date are all going to magically change because of that magic drug. It simply isn't going to. That is not reality. That's an absence of reality. And so, as exciting as psychedelics are, and you see lots of examples where on the right, they're dealing with serious illnesses, PTSD, TRD, depression, anxiety, suicide, treatment, use disorders, opioid, alcohol, headaches, Alzheimer's. These are, again, huge opportunities because the debilitating nature and the economic implication of these illnesses are so great. Huge. So I recognize what they're trying to do. It's exciting. I think that there's great potential. I think we're seeing some great potential outcomes from these. They just simply cannot lose sight of the fact that those physiological, anatomical, and physical impedance is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. So let's talk about emerging drug delivery platforms. Now, I'm going to place a lot of emphasis, as you've already kind of heard me lean into, from an intranasal delivery standpoint, because that's the platform that we've built. Our genesis is actually creating novel devices to irrigate the nasal environment. So we know the nasal environment, where our founders and our scientific advisory board members are internationally renowned in rhinology and otolaryngology, a big word to describe the nose and the anatomy of the nose. And so we know that space very, very well. And so because we had a platform that's unmatched to irrigate the nasal environment, we also knew that there was greater potential to actually deliver the drug as well. But I'm not trying to sell what we have. I'm really trying to paint the art of the possible, right? And so let's focus on intranasal delivery, but let's hyper focus on this concept of course, optimizing the delivery of drug. That makes a lot of sense, but more so the targeting of the drug to the point of administration, because unless you can hit the points of administration with a nasal cavity, the best drug in the world doesn't matter because you can't get it there. The best nanotechnology doesn't matter because you can't reach the point of administration, right? So you don't even start the A and the D until you hit the point of administration. And so you got to focus on where do you need to go with a nasal cavity and how can you possibly get there? But here's the great news, is that it allows for multi-route administration. So through the nose, you can deliver obviously locally. That's obvious because you're already in the nose, right? But some devices work better than others. It's still not easy. Don't just assume, you can just spray and it's going to work well. It doesn't work that way. I'm going to explain why it doesn't work that way. But you absolutely can deliver the drug very effectively local, for local antibiotics and anti-inflammatory treatments for allergies, chronic sinusitis, allergic rhinitis. Solid, absolutely. You can also deliver the drug systemically in the far right and left hand parts of the nasal environment, which I'm going to describe in the next slide, is your respiratory zone. It actually controls respiration, how you breathe. It's a delivery route systemically throughout your body, so you can still through the nose deliver a drug systemically. And then lastly, most importantly, it is uniquely designed. Not easy. You have to have the right architecture of the device, but it is uniquely designed to facilitate delivery of a drug directly to the brain. Huge. It's multi-drug. You can deliver a small molecule, a large molecule, a psychedelic. It doesn't particularly care. Now, some of those are easier said than others. Some of those do require advanced nano medicines, hydrogels and hydrowrappers and excipients that can then further improve the absorption and distribution. But there are examples of where all of these have been delivered intranasal. And here are some of the advantages, again, intranasal delivery with the right platform is you allow for targeted delivery of where it needs to go. You have enhanced distribution because you're able to distribute the drug to where it needs to go, which are your points of administration, your target areas, even including away from the negative areas that have promoted negative side effects that have also sidelined and derailed drugs. Self-administration, just like the patch. You don't have to hook yourself up to an IV or a needle. It reduces side effects because it's not always going through those major organs. You can actually divert it, keep it local, or deliver it directly to the brain. Again, multi-route I covered. You're going to overcome some of the barriers. I've already given an example of that. And again, the ability to optimize bioavailability, where in some cases you're not able to do that. So again, huge potential. So I break this to local and systemic, which I've already covered, and then nose to brain I'm going to cover next, the more complicated ones. But even when you think about local and systemic, you think, well, that's easy. You just spray in the nose. So you heard me say a few times, it's about anatomy, it's about physiology, it's about physics, and it all comes down to targeting. So let me give you an example of that. So think about all the existing devices, less our device. And again, I'm not trying to promote, so I'm not going to show you our device, but just imagine it's an anatomically designed device that's going to overcome everything I just described. And it's fully patented, which really prevents everyone else from doing the exact same thing. So all the other devices are constrained right now, and they're all the same. The bottoms of these devices look very, very different. The bottoms doesn't matter. The bottom is where you hold the drug. The nozzle is where you deliver the drug. And all of them are short, straight up with a single hole. Short, straight up with a single hole, and that's highly problematic. So let me explain why that is. So let's think about the simple of just simply delivering the drug just to the nose. Forget systemically, forget to the brain. You're just trying to get it throughout the nose. Is that easy? Not with short, straight up with a single hole, and here's why. So let's think about where you need to go. You need to deliver that drug throughout the entire nasal cavity, which is your middle turbinate, your middle meatus, which is the outside wrapper. So you've got to get not just into these little nodules, these turbinates, but you actually got to hit the entire surface area of that nasal environment, which represents the target zone for the drug. That is much easier said than done. What happens is this is your inferior turbinate down here. Because the devices are short, they typically, and some of you may experience this, this always comes out in clinical studies. It hits this inferior turbinate, it shoots either to the back of the throat or outside your nose. You don't want outside your nose. You don't even want it to be at the tip of your nose, your vestibule. That is not a highly vascular region. You don't want it to go to the back of the throat. That causes discomfort, it causes pressure, it causes bad taste. Those are all negatives that you do not want. So you actually want to bypass, put it further in your nose, so length matters. But it's not just length. You now got to direct the fluid up and back and to the right. So here's your up and back. Remember, you're trying to get to the respiratory zone for that drug. You got to get up and back. You got to get up and beyond this turbinate. So how do you get up, back, into the right and left? If you're shooting a fluid with a straight nozzle, how do you bend it back, up and back, and then to the right and left? Again, that's why I say physics is important. It cannot defy the laws of physics. It's incredibly difficult to do unless you have a device that takes into consideration the anatomical construct to deliver that drug. And then that device can actually bypass this impedance, the vestibule. It can allow the drug to be directed away from the middle of the nose, the septum. That actually causes bleeding. That's bad. It directs it away from the back of the throat. I already described that was bad. And then to those target regions. It's absolutely possible. And I'm going to show examples of how we'll be able to do that. Again, that's the easy one. Let's go to the harder one. Let's go to the brain. So how do you go directly to the brain? Well, there's two ways to do it. The trigeminal nerve is on the respiratory side of the nasal cavity, both left and right. It's further back. So you got to hit this entire respiratory zone to get to the trigeminal nerve, which provides both a variety of mechanisms to directly deliver that drug to the brain. The olfactory is even harder. It's right up here. It's right between your eyebrows. It's called your skull base. And there are intracellular and extracellular routes through the olfactory receptor neurons to do an axonal transport directly to the brain. But let's imagine how that is. So I already described how difficult it was to go up, back, left, and right, which is the easy one. So how do you get to the olfactory? So first of all, you got to go up and back, over, and then up again. So here's the best way I would describe this. So imagine being in a 30 by 30 square foot house, and you're on one side of the house. And I told you, take a hose and spray the back wall. You'd say, that's pretty easy. As long as I have enough pressure, I can hit that back wall. But what if I told you, take that hose and I want you to spray the last 10 feet of the ceiling? You'd pause, you'd be like, wait a minute. So let me get this straight. I'm stuck at the front of the house, which is like the front of the nose. And you're telling me I have to hit the last third of the ceiling when I know when I spray, it's going to arc down because of gravity. And then you're asking me to curve it back up the last 30%. Like, how is that possible? I can't defy physics. No, you cannot, nor can I. But you certainly can design a delivery device that takes into consideration physiology, anatomy, targeting, and physics. And we've actually proven we can do that. And so here's an example. So the one thing and these are real clinical studies that have been published many times. And what we didn't do was, and again, this is to show you it's actually possible. So there's zero theoretical here. This is 100% reality. So what we didn't do is we didn't say, hey, look on the left-hand side. We're going to take, and there's like 3 people in the world that have this nasal environment, right? No one has this other than this one patient and maybe 2 others, right? This nasal environment is very appealing, right? It is non-obstructed. It's very symmetrical. But even if you were to find those 3 people on the planet with this nasal environment, how would you still defy the laws of physics to get it up into the right and up into the left and up, back, and up again to the olfactory? You still can't do it. We actually took a patient that has what's considered a maximum deviated septum. And as you can see here, there's nothing symmetrical about it. It is highly obstructed. It's very deviated. We took the easiest side of that nasal environment, which was pretty open, and we gave the leading intranasal device the opportunity to spray. And then we took our device and we actually subjected our device to the more complicated, actually this one, and we'll show you what happens. So on the right-hand side is the leading device. I'm not going to name them. I'm not here to throw people under the bus. I'm just illustrating what's possible. This is the leading device that's found in most intranasal delivery medications. And what you see here and what research has shown is only 3 to 5% go beyond the front of your nose, the vestibule. And in fact, this is a camera that's gone into your nose. So that blue dye that shows the distribution of the fluid, which would equate to the distribution of the drug, in this case, on the right-hand side, was actually all stuck in the vestibule, which matches what research and clinical studies have found. When you look at, well, wait a minute, how about the respiratory? How about the lateral wall? How about all those zones you said I got to hit, Don? As you can see, virtually nothing hits. This was actually after taking 10 video shots, and we took the best performing shot. On the left-hand side is our device. We shot it once, one and done, and it's not even fully optimized. And what you can see is because it's anatomically designed, because it actually can counter the laws of physics, if you will. What you see here is the lateral wall. The respiratory is saturated. This is actually pointing up where you can actually see the olfactory. So we've perfectly hit those target zones. The respiratory, the lateral wall, the skull base, we've perfectly hit with a device that hasn't even been fully optimized. And so this should excite everybody because, again, you think about it, as I said before, if you have the best in class drug, but you can't target it to the point of administration with a nasal, it doesn't matter. If you have the best in class device or drug, and additionally, the best in class nanotechnology for absorption and distribution, it still doesn't matter unless you can reach the point of administration. What would it matter if you need to hit here and you can't get there? It really doesn't matter. So this should excite everybody. We're about to see a revolution in drug delivery intranasally because of the potential of all the great drugs that are existing, because of the potential of all the great nanotechnologies that are existing. And then in between it is our delivery platform, which again has proven itself to outperform anything that's on the market, which is very exciting. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is to me an illustration of, and again, I want to keep on the good side, if you will, of the FDA, right? But this is to illustrate that even the FDA has historically, I think, done, I'm going to call it a disservice. So if you look at the guidelines and the performance metrics of intranasal, what they look at is really the consistency of the spray, which is important. In, you know, it's quality. I get that, right? But it looks at the geometry, the amount of drug in a given geometrical spray, the top geometry, the curvature, how much square area is actually sprayed. And really they're looking at the beginning, middle, and end of that device. Does it do the same each and every time? And of course that's important, but that's a manufacturing, that's a quality thing. It's important, but that has nothing to do, zero to do with the targeted areas of delivery. It doesn't say, hey, device, how are you at hitting the respiratory? How are you at hitting the olfactory? Zero consideration whatsoever. And so I think what you're going to find over time is even the FDA is going to start to recognize, which is going to be great, because it's going to help advance a class of drugs that the targeting and where the drug needs to go is incredibly important. Couple slides and then we're done. Opportunities. So this is in COVID. What you see in COVID is there's a high level of ACE and TMPRSS2 presence and expression within the olfactory, skull base, within the respiratory epithelium. And that explains why people have side effects like bad taste, loss of taste, loss of smell, neurological mental health disorders, because that SARS-CoV-2 is actually getting up into the ACE2 and accessing, again, ultimately the brain. Respiratory, again, this is in your respiratory zone, high vascularity. It's hitting the organs, the brain, the heart, the lung. You're seeing downstream implications with respect to those organs. Intranasal can work. I've already given an example of why it can work. I've given you an example of in cases how it works and how in cases of it doesn't work. The key is with a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine or prophylactic, you've got to be able to hit the respiratory. You got to be able to hit potentially the olfactory, depending upon what you need to do. When you look at medicine adherence, even some of the best drugs out there, there's still a problem with anxiety going in to get a needle or an IV. Again, there's huge opportunity. 50% of people don't take their medications, some of which because there's a lot of cross complexity with the medication, but also because they're not seeing a positive outcome. And so why would they subject themselves to a $56,000 bill, or subject themselves to an intravenous, or subject themselves to a drug that's proven that the vast majority of people experience no outcome? A small percentage of them improve 0.2% improvement. And there are neurological implications like swelling of the brain and brain bleeding. Like, why would you subject yourself to that if you have to deal with all that, right? It doesn't make sense. That's bad medicine adherence. And then lastly, as I've already described, if you combine best-in-class high potential drugs with, you know, intranasal advanced formulations, with advanced intranasal excipients and nanotechnologies, with the right device, and you add those all up end to end, you will have unmatched health impact like the world has never seen before. That's it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yes, that's fine, Mr. Donald Tony. Is there any questions from audience?
Hello.
Yes.
I just wonder. Okay, nice talk. So, and just wonder if we have. You're just talking about the delivery system, right? So
yeah,
that's
yes, right. I'm particularly talking about the delivery. Well, I want to be careful with delivery system, right? Because oftentimes people put the excipients in a nanotech and consider it the delivery system. So I'm specifically referring to the device that can then be combined with the right drug and the right delivery nanotechnology to kind of end-to-end create a new optimized way of delivering drugs, but very particularly around the device, yes.
So you are devising this small device, right? So for nasal kind of. So I remember one company is like insulin for nasal nasal drug called Mankind, right? So they also have a kind of this device, so very smaller one, also very efficient. So that's also approved by FDA. So But my question is that if you will use your device, can you say that a specific target somewhere? How can you be more specific? How do you do that with your device?
Yeah, so because I really wasn't trying to promote our device, and I really mean that when I say it, I don't even have a picture of our device. But if you were to contact me afterwards, I'm happy to share it with you. But the device is anatomically designed. It's curved, and in fact, we have two sides to the business. One is a consumer product side where we have a nasal irrigation. Think of like a neti pot or a nasal irrigation, and it uses the same architecture on that nozzle. So the nozzle is anatomically designed where there's curvature to it to bypass all the anatomical impedance. There's length to it to bypass the anatomical impedance. There is multitude of targeting control because it has directional control where it can actually rotate with different configurations, and it's actually a configurable device. So if you told me, for example, I only want to deliver it locally, I don't want to hit the olfactory, the device is designed to do that. If you tell me I want to hit 70% on the olfactory and 30% on the respiratory zone, we have a device that does that. It's already been configured to do that. And it was actually based on guidance with international renowned neurologists who said, we want to have 70% of the drug hit the olfactory, roughly 30% hit the respiratory and trigeminal nerve. We can configure it to do that. So again, it has unique design to it, so it can bypass all anatomical impedance. It has directional control, so it can actually direct the fluid anywhere at all within the nasal cavity. It's been on the market in the form of a rinse. So patients have used it, they love it. It 100% eliminates the drowning sensation. Nothing goes to the back of the throat, nothing comes out the front of your nose for a particular drug. Is not that same loss that exists everywhere else.
So you mean the nasal, when you use nasal, so your device, so you can through nasal to deliver the drug to anywhere in the body.
Yep, yeah, and from the nasal environment, you can deliver it again locally to the nose, systemically throughout the entire body via the respiratory region, and then also direct. And again, this is key, directly to the brain, not going back through systemic, through blood-brain, through blood CSF. Remember, that's the key here. As soon as you send that drug through systemic, you're back into dealing with the blood-brain, blood CSF barrier, right? So you want to find, in addition to being able to do that, if you do want to do that for some reason, you want to have a direct route to the brain. As I described, there's extracellular and intracellular, the neuronal axonal transport directly to the brain that's been proven.
So probably, so I'm not sure. So the key for your device to deliver the drug probably also based on the particle size, right?
Sure. Yep.
Nanoparticles. So that's also very important. So.
Yeah. No, it is. But I can tell you that there was a time where people told me you can only do small molecules. You cannot do large molecules. That's 100% inaccurate. There are examples of where you can put large molecules. We have an effort underway with a monoclonal antibody right now, IgG, IgM, pretty decent size, able to transport that, through as well. Gene therapy, again, there are examples of how you can transport that as well. And so, yes, of course, if it's so large, there's probably a point of impedance, but I can tell you there's plenty of drugs that are adequately sized. Oh, and there's also additionally nanotechnology and hydrogels and wrappers and other unique formulations that allow you to even take a drug that typically couldn't be transported through the nasal respiratory epithelium, can still do it because of the nanotechnology. So I think there's a few tools that we can use to get it there. But of course, if the drug is the size of my hand, it's not going through the nasal epithelium.
Yeah, I understand that. So for your drug to deliver all over the body, that's great. So, but I just wonder, how can you your device use your device to deliver for the drug to over the brain? So because there is a BBB, right? So we know that, right? So that it's not easy to pass this barrier. So what's your principle? You using your device to pass this barrier to get to the get the drug to the brain. So.
Because again, where it's targeting are the two areas that researchers have shown bypass the blood-brain barrier, and that's the trigeminal nerve and the olfactory. It's proven. There are people who have done this with a variety of different drugs and shown through, actually looking at the bioavailability, where all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, why is there lower bioavailability, but the drug got to the brain so quickly? Like, how is that possible? It's really simple, because it didn't take the traditional systemic circulation route. It didn't go into the blood. There is reduced bioavailability, which again, and this is one thing we've actually talked to people on for a while now. People often will say, and again, this goes back into the inaccurate statement to say the best way to deliver a drug is intravenous and a needle, because you get 100%, as if it's all associated with bioavailability. Yes, through those routes, you're going to achieve high bioavailability. But if you're in the nasal environment, you may actually achieve less bioavailability, but that doesn't mean it's bad. That could actually mean it's good, meaning that it's actually finding a direct route. And there are examples where the drug works not in 45 minutes, but minutes, like a couple of minutes. And that's because it's directly going to the brain.
Oh, okay.